Imagine you are a doctor and a patient walks in, but this patient is not like any other because this patient is 1.7 million years old. And when you look at the x-ray of their left toe bone, you find a tumor, a clear and unmistakable sign of malignant cancer. And in that moment, everything you thought you knew about this disease gets shattered because most of us have been walking around with this quiet assumption that cancer is a modern curse, a punishment handed down by industrialization, by fast food, by cigarettes, by pollution, by the toxic cocktail of 21st century living. But that assumption is wrong, profoundly and completely wrong, because cancer was here long before factories, long before processed sugar, before smartphones and sedentary desk jobs. And understanding this truth is not just a fascinating history lesson, it is something that directly, urgently, and personally connects to every single one of us alive today. The earliest known evidence of human cancer comes from an early human relative who lived around 1.7 million years ago. This individual, likely of the species Paranthropus robustus or Homo ergaster, lived with a malignant tumor in their left toe bone. Let that sink in for a moment. 1.7 million years ago, when our ancestors were still figuring out how to walk upright consistently, when tools were made of stone and survival meant running from predators, when there were no cities, no agriculture, no concept of medicine, even then, deep inside the cells of one of our earliest relatives, something went wrong. A single cell somewhere in that toe stopped following the rules, stopped doing its assigned job, and started multiplying uncontrollably, invading surrounding tissue, becoming a cancer, and that individual had absolutely no idea what was happening to them. No name for what they were experiencing, no treatment, no hope of relief. The bone, specifically the metatarsal that runs between the ankle and the pinky toe, was originally excavated between 1960 and 1980 from the Swartkrans Cave, part of a World Heritage Site in South Africa called the Cradle of Humankind, a site famous for its extraordinary density of hominin bones. And here is the remarkable part. This bone sat in collections for decades, was examined multiple times, and was initially dismissed as a benign mass. It was only when modern high-resolution imaging technology was applied to it that the truth revealed itself that this was not benign at all. This was osteosarcoma, one of the most aggressive and malignant forms of bone cancer known to medicine, and that single realization changed the entire timeline of human cancer history overnight. But this is not a story of just one ancient individual. A systematic review of 154 paleopathological studies documented 272 archaeologically recovered individuals exhibiting skeletal or soft tissue evidence of cancer, with evidence spanning from 1.8 million years ago all the way to 1900 CE. 272 people. And remember, these are only the ones whose bones or preserved tissue happened to survive, happened to be excavated, happened to be studied with the right technology at the right time. Think about how impossibly small that fraction is compared to the total number of humans and human ancestors who lived across nearly 2 million years of history. The real number of ancient people who experience cancer is almost certainly vastly, astronomically higher. We simply have no way of knowing how high because tumors in fleshy tissue decay and generally are not fossilized, so they are extremely difficult for archaeologists to find, meaning every cancer of the lung, liver, pancreas, colon, or breast that any ancient human ever suffered has been erased by time without a trace. The bones are all we have, and even bones tell us only a fragment of the story. Among those 272 documented cases, the most widely reported evidence is metastasis to bone, meaning cancer that started elsewhere in the body and spread to the bones, followed by multiple myeloma, a cancer of the plasma cells. And here is what is genuinely eerie about this ancient data. Males were represented more than females in the dataset, and middle adults aged 35 to 49 and old adults aged 50 and above were the most affected age groups, which is almost exactly the demographic pattern we see in modern cancer statistics today, meaning that the way cancer behaves, the way it targets, the way it progresses through a human lifespan, none of that has fundamentally changed across nearly 2 million years of human evolution. Now let us go back even further, not just to our human ancestors, but to a time before humans existed at all. A 240 million year old fossilized leg bone has yielded evidence of what might be one of the earliest known cases of cancer ever found, with scientists detecting a highly malignant tumor in the fossilized leg bone of a stem turtle. 240 million years. The dinosaurs had not even arrived yet. This means that cancer is not just older than human civilization, not just older than the human species. Cancer is older than the dinosaurs themselves. It is a disease that emerged alongside the basic concept of multicellular life, because the moment cells began working together to form complex organisms, the possibility emerged that one of those cells might go rogue, might abandon its cooperative role, might begin pursuing its own unlimited selfish growth at the expense of the whole body. And that possibility has existed in every multicellular creature that has ever lived on this planet, from ancient turtles to Neanderthals to the person sitting next to you right now. Speaking of Neanderthals, these are perhaps our most famous ancient relatives, the hominins who coexisted with early modern humans and whose DNA still lives in about 1 to 4% of every non-African person alive today. And they had cancer too. Researchers identified evidence of fibrous dysplasia, or bone cancer, in the rib of a 120,000-year-old Neanderthal from Krapina, Croatia. And when scientists described this discovery, they said something that stopped the scientific community in its tracks. It's evidence that Neanderthals suffered tumors, that they were susceptible to the same kinds of diseases that we see in modern humans. There is something profound and strangely moving about this. The idea that a Neanderthal, 120,000 years ago, perhaps sitting by a fire in what is now Croatia, was carrying a cancerous tumor in their rib, feeling pain they could not explain, weakened by a disease they had no language to describe, facing a biological battle that no amount of strength or hunting skill could help them win. They were, in that specific way, just like us. And then came the ancient Egyptians, the civilization that gave us some of the earliest written medical records in human history, and even they were documenting cancer. The earliest possible reference to cancer in human texts is attributed to the great Egyptian physician Imhotep, who lived around 2600 BC. And in his writings, Imhotep describes an affliction characterized by a bulging mass in the breast that was resistant to any known therapies. Imhotep was, by all accounts, a brilliant man. He was an architect, a physician, a philosopher, eventually deified by the Egyptians as a god of medicine. And even he, with all his knowledge and skill, looked at this disease and wrote essentially the words, "There is no treatment." That same helplessness, that same confrontation with a disease that does not negotiate, does not respond to willpower or intelligence or even the best available medicine, is something that oncologists in America today, in the most advanced hospitals on Earth, still sometimes face. Researchers analyzed ancient literature as well as examination records of hundreds of Egyptian, Peruvian, and Chilean mummies for evidence of cancer, and the embalming process during mummification preserves most of the soft tissues, allowing researchers to analyze soft tissue cancers that would otherwise be completely invisible in the archaeological record, and what they found was sobering: only 5 cases of malignant tumors overall, which sounds like a tiny number, but scientists are quick to caution against interpreting this as proof that cancer was rare in ancient Egypt, because the preservation of mummies, their discovery, their access to researchers, and the limitations of even modern imaging on ancient tissue all create layers of bias that make the true numbers impossible to know. Now here is the question that every thoughtful person eventually asks. If cancer is this ancient, if it has been with us for nearly 2 million years, then why does it feel so overwhelmingly modern? Why does it seem like everyone around us has cancer, or knows someone with cancer? Why does it feel like this epidemic exploded specifically in the last 100 years? And the answer, when you actually dig into the science, turns out to be both simpler and more complex than most people expect. The suggestion that cancer was rarer in ancient populations is not surprising at all, but it is not just because of our modern lifestyles. It is largely because we live longer today than at any point in human history, and hundreds or thousands of years ago, life expectancy was short. Many people died in middle age from infectious diseases, and death in childbirth or early childhood was devastatingly common. But cancer is mainly a disease of the elderly, with 3/4 of all cases diagnosed in people aged 60 and over. This is the core insight that changes everything. If your ancient ancestor had a 50% chance of dying from an infection before their 35th birthday, then the cancer that might have developed in their colon at age 62 never got the chance to appear. They were already gone. Their cancer died with them before it could develop. A century ago, life expectancy in the United States was just 49 years, and people were far more likely to die of infections, heart attacks, or complications from conditions like diabetes than they are today. Improved sewage systems and community hygiene mean we are exposed to fewer infections than previously, and modern medicine helps us survive many of the conditions we do get. So here is the deep, uncomfortable irony of modern medicine. By saving us from the diseases that used to kill us young, by giving us vaccines and antibiotics and clean water and surgical interventions, we have extended human life to the point where cancer, which was always lurking inside our biology, finally has enough time to emerge. We saved ourselves from one set of killers, and in doing so, we created the conditions for cancer to become an epidemic. 2/3 of the increase in cancer we see today is simply because we live longer, not because of wheat or corn syrup or sugar or any particular food villain that wellness culture has decided to blame this week. But that leaves 1/3, and that 1/3 matters enormously because that is the portion of modern cancer's rise that is genuinely, provably connected to the world we have built. Lifestyle factors such as not smoking, keeping a healthy weight, limiting alcohol consumption, getting enough exercise, and avoiding excessive sunburn have an important and well-documented effect on cancer risk. Tobacco smoke alone, with its cocktail of hundreds of carcinogenic chemicals, is responsible for roughly 30% of all cancer deaths in the United States. Obesity, which has exploded in modern populations, is now the second leading preventable cause of cancer after smoking, and there is something particularly disturbing happening right now in the data. Recent trends show a significant increase in cancer cases in individuals below 50, something not seen historically, strongly suggesting that modern lifestyle factors are accelerating cancer development in ways that go beyond simply living longer. 25-year-olds with colon cancer, 30-year-olds with breast cancer, teenagers with thyroid cancer. This is not explainable by longevity alone. Something in the modern environment, whether it is ultra-processed food, microplastics, sedentary behavior, disrupted sleep patterns, or some combination of factors we have not yet fully identified, is triggering cancer development in ways that are genuinely new. Growing scientific evidence indicates that human activities are causing cancer rates to rise in both human and wildlife populations, due to the inability of our ancestral anti-cancer defenses to cope with modern environmental risks. The evolutionary mismatch between the threats our bodies were designed to handle and the threats we actually face today is having consequences that run deeper than most people realize. Our bodies were built for a different world, a world without synthetic chemicals in every product we touch, without artificial light disrupting our circadian rhythms every night, without ultra-processed food engineered to override our natural appetite signals, and when you run ancient biological machinery in a radically modern environment, things break down in ways that evolution never prepared us for. Our ancient lineage gave us genes that contain the capacity for cancer, but the disease manifests itself in myriad ways depending on what we are exposed to throughout our lives, and researchers have put it as plainly and as powerfully as possible. You can opt for the cleanest diet imaginable. You can live in the most pristine environment available, but the capacity for this disease is ancient, and it is within us, regardless of what we do to ourselves. That statement is simultaneously humbling and strangely liberating, because if cancer were purely a result of personal choices and lifestyle failures, then the guilt and shame that cancer patients already carry would be even more crushing. The truth is that cancer is, at its deepest level, a feature of being a complex multicellular organism living in a universe that does not care about our survival. A biological glitch built into the very architecture of life, and that glitch was present 1.7 million years ago in a small hominin walking across the African savanna with a cancerous tumor in their toe. And it is present today in research labs across America, where scientists are working harder and smarter than at any point in human history to finally outrun it. Cancer mortality has plummeted in recent years, and survival rates have doubled in the last 40 years, which means that while the disease is ancient, our ability to fight it is accelerating at a pace that would be unimaginable to every human being who came before us. From the Neanderthal carrying a silent tumor in their rib 120,000 years ago to the Egyptian physician standing over a patient with nothing to offer but the devastating honesty that this disease could not be treated, to the oncologist in a Houston hospital today delivering news that what was once a death sentence is now, with the right combination of immunotherapy and targeted treatment, something a patient can survive and even recover from completely. So the next time someone tells you that cancer is a modern, man-made disease, that if we just ate the right foods and avoided the right chemicals and lived the right lifestyle, it would simply disappear, you can tell them the truth. Cancer has been with us since before we were fully human. It existed in the bones of creatures that roamed this earth 240 million years ago. It is woven into the biological fabric of complex life itself. And the most extraordinary thing is not that we get cancer, but that after 1.7 million years of facing this disease with no tools, no knowledge, and no hope, we have finally reached a moment in history where, for the very first time, we might actually win.